enough to do that?
I think so. We got 5 here.
You got a quorum.
Yeah. Roll call.
You on the spot.
Sorry about that.
No. Mr. Anderson, Mr. Philmetzger, Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. LaSalle.
Here.
Mr. Mahoney. Mr. Meyer.
Here.
Ms. Shaftsma.
Here.
Mr. McEnroe.
Here.
Mr. Gifford.
Okay, the next item is approval of the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of November 19th, 2013.
I second it.
Okay, you have approval and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, 13,687. Oh, that's the minutes. Okay. Chairman report. Well, I don't have anything. I was kind of surprised I was going to get it today. I thought it was going to be next month.
Well, I might just add that I want to thank you all for your service this year, and it's been a great year, so that's it.
Agenda analysis. Anything?
I wanted to add the intersection of Central Point, Warner Parrott, Lynn Avenue. To the agenda.
The road where all things meet.
Yes, where all they meet.
I would like to add a dead-end issue on Oak Tree Terrace.
And I would like to add just a kind of an FYI on South End Concept Plan and traffic issues on that.
Okay. And just to make it, Mr. Anderson's here.
Thank you. Apologize for being late.
No problem. They just called your name about 2 minutes ago. Public comment. New business, decision items. Number 6. Anybody? What?
So let's jump down to 6A.
Introduction to new TAC members. Okay. We have one here, and I'm bad with names.
Henry.
Yes. List, I think.
Henry
Yeah,
McEnroe.
that's
Can't
right.
read
That's
back.
right.
Is that Scottish
Welcome.
McEnroe?
It is German.
German? All right.
So
I broke it.
Henry's one of 2 new members. William Gifford, who you all know, is also been appointed to the Transportation Advisory Committee, and Henry fills the position of a vacancy at large position. So I don't know if you feel large, but you're at large. So that's
Roam the city.
that essentially means you're not representing any particular group. You're just a citizen at large and serving not much differently than the rest of you, but from and then I guess William, we've elected to have him fill the vacancy of a neighborhood association position. As you all know, William's very active in neighborhood associations, so that just seems to lend itself to that. The 2 differences between the positions that are have been appointed and are currently active is that Henry, your term expires in 2015, so you'll serve for 2 years, and William's position is only through 2014. So that has mostly to do with just the vacancies and how we don't want everybody to fall off the list in the same year. So we split them up into 2-year stints like that. And then we've got one other vacancy that's going to be filled by Sedamir Jessic, who I don't. Did he respond that he would be here tonight just to sit in the audience?
Invite him.
Okay, so his first meeting will be the first meeting of January. So welcome.
Okay. 6B, Public Works Director, you have updates.
I think Martin and I can tag team a little bit on this, but there was Mike Berman's who owns a business on Main Street and lives in Kenema, brought up concerns about speeding on 99E and also on Main Street as vehicles come off the bridge and kind of maneuver through downtown Oregon City towards 99E. And then I think his most specific one was as they leave Main Street and venture out on a 99E. His feeling was that if that light is green as they're coming down Main Street, they accelerate through there to make the green light. And Martin and I talked a little bit. Martin, maybe you want to speak up just about some of the conversations you've had with ODOT on the 99E concern and what you think.
Onto Mike's specific concern regarding traffic coming from Main Street over to 99E, I don't have a ready resolution for that. John and I have talked about that. It's a difficult intersection in terms of angles to try and do any sort of radar monitoring or some sort of awareness to make people realize the speeds they're going through there. I do have a meeting scheduled for after the holidays with ODOT staff to try and take a look at some sort of tactic that we could utilize on northbound traffic on 99E. So as they're heading north on 99 coming into the tunnel, about the possibility of including some radar speed detection and signage there, so individuals coming through that area realize, it's gone from 40 to 30 to 25 as you're entering the tunnel, and what's your current speed, to kind of make them aware. I can tell you from personal experience today, because we had half the road closed while we were doing a repair on 99E today, individuals are not cognizant of how fast they're going, and anything that we can do to kind of make them a little bit more aware of increased safety for everyone. So hopefully I'll have a report for you back up there the next TAC meeting.
Are they going to remove those tracks?
What tracks?
It's
the railroad
on-
tracks?
Yeah, since the mill is not going to be there. I think
No.
it should be left as historical. That'll slow people down.
They're in the wrong place.
Yeah, those tracks, there's a spur there. There's two spurs actually that feed the mill, but then there is a main line for Union Pacific, and from another project that we're doing, I can tell you that line is the primary line for the west coast of the United States, and everything moving from Canada, Alaska, Washington to the Southern Oregon, Southern California region by freight goes through that line.
I thought about the one that's on Main Street.
Oh, on Main Street, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I think it should be left for historical, because that's where the streetcar go out through. And
Yeah. Well, that spur was at one time not the same set of tracks, but at one point in time, there was a Portland streetcar that went through that section of roadway, and but that spur that's there now was intended for the mill's use. So as they would bring paper product or probably wood chips, I'm not sure which, but they would bring in on rail car, roll it out onto across 99E and out onto Main Street. Usually they do that at 3 a.m. in the morning, and then they would use that to maneuver those rail cars so that they could dump them into their hopper there for use. And so the use is kind of at this point stalled, and we've asked the property owner, which is the trustee at this point in time, whether or not they'd be willing to see that go away, but they have yet to kind of respond to that. So it's owned by the property owner, the trustee at this point in time.
Yeah, but I think it slows them down to make the turns. So you can't speed across that track or else you'll slide. But in the 60s, they used to run trains all the way down the middle with sawdust down the middle of Oregon City and to the mill until they put that spur in and changed it.
Yeah, interestingly, the southern portion of that, we just went there last week, is actually, it looks like it's grade on asphalt, but it's actually on a trestle. So it's pretty interesting down there.
I'm sure you've thought of this, but how about putting up one of those flashing speed signs as they're coming out of the tunnel You understand what I'm talking about? Where they
Coming down the hill was what we were just
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Just as they're coming out of the tunnel, that thing would flash at them, it might slow them down.
I'm cautious about doing that on the edge of a turn. I'd rather hit them as they're coming into the tunnel and slow them down prior to a point of collision, rather than having it on the edge of a return from a turn, because then it's a distraction as you're trying to angle off from a turn into a straight. So I think the better choice would be hit them before they get to the tunnel and can strike something.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because some people may turn right onto Railroad.
Yeah. Well, some people are coming out of that turn, and you don't know if you're not from here what to expect, and you suddenly see something flash at you. You get skittish and decide I'm going to hit the brakes. And you
Those are
lose
really
control.
effective, especially for people that want to do the right thing. You know, when I come down Lynn and curves on the 5th, you know, I'm constantly being reminded. It's like, 'cause I get caught up in my thoughts. And
I think you guys will enjoy this. We just received a new 12-foot variable message board through a cooperative grant within the region. We got it yesterday, and we used it today at our project on 99E. And you can put whatever messages you like on this. So today, when we first started, I had it originally as merge left ahead, and we were getting issues with the cars coming down here were not slowing down. So then we changed it to merge left ahead. Speed reduced 25 mph, and then we just had squad car sit at the back end of our construction area with the blue lights on, and we never had anybody exceed 25 miles an hour. So,
There also was a sign, because I went that way, you know, a work zone, you know.
yeah, we have several
And
signs out there. There's
fines
the manual
double,
calls
which
for
was
there's a
good.
set number of signs and placement of signs and cones, and we comply with that as much as possible. Just interesting, some of the things we have to deal with when we're working with 99E.
Working with the public.
Yeah. Okay.
They want to see how close they can run over the flagger's foot.
So the second item, lack of no right turn signage at the jug handle, that came up. I think several of you kind of commented on that. I got to be honest with you, I haven't spent much time looking at that. I don't know if Martin has, but I don't disagree. We haven't made any progress on that, so
I've
we'll
got
keep
some
that on.
additional information for you, though.
Okay.
I've spent 3 times down, sitting in the Home Depot parking lot, and you can see the lights from down one spot down there. And exactly 33% of the stopped vehicles continue to make a right turn on the red.
Oh, you've been counting cars, have you?
No. I'm speaking of just regular cars. All of the cars that had stopped at that red light then continue on the red to make their right turn.
Oh,
33% of them.
That's
That's
pretty
a
big.
lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
And I've done it over three
So they're
different
33%
time
are
spans.
making that illegal turn.
That's correct, yeah.
Now, that's the one that's heading south on 213?
Yes.
Yeah.
Prairie Schooner Way.
Oh, it's the other way too.
It's the other way too, yeah.
There's at least
But-
4 cars will.
Yep. Yeah. But these cars on Prairie Schooner Way, they stop first. And then they go through the red.
And there's probably a good reason why, but I've never understood why they don't, you know, allow the lanes to turn on, you know.
Well, like I said before, they allow that up at Redland Road, exactly the same kind of
When
intersection.
everybody's up to 55.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think that's...
Anyway, I thought I'd give you a little information and maybe some ammunition.
Do you have a count?
I've got it at home, I can let you know what the count was.
Email it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do that, I'll let you know.
We're finalizing the speed signs.
It's a moneymaker for the city.
You want to mention this while we're on this one?
Yeah, if you want. Well, I was saying I can look at that tomorrow when we're signing off the speed sign.
And by the way, the signage, at least on the one turning north off of, is it Prairie Schooner? Very clear.
Going north.
Going toward 205 entrance at the gas station.
That's Clackamas River Drive.
Clackamas River Drive, thanks. That's very clear. I mean, 2 stop red lights, and right in the middle of it says no turn on red. So, and cars
Yeah.
just continue to,
I think it's just kind of that feeling of I have a right to make a right to make a right turn on red.
Yep.
And
There's no cars coming right.
There's no cars
I
coming.
think The problem is just the speeds, I think, and it is kind of interesting your point that they allow it at Redland, but they don't allow it at Prairie Schooner.
Well, the difference there.
I don't know if the sight distance is different. I guess.
No,
like
there
I said,
isn't
I
any
haven't-
difference. The only difference is that at Redland, they actually have a right turn signal. They have the 2 left turn signals, 2 lanes for that, and then they have the right turn signal. So
Well,
they have additional signage.
They definitely
there.
have a right turn signal at Prairie Schooner Way, right? That's
Well,
the only movement they
Yeah,
can
the
make.
only,
and they have a
that's the only
signal there.
choice they have, so it's not necessary. So, yeah, I don't know what the difference is.
There is another difference. Prairie Schooner has 2 right-hand turn lanes and Redwood only has 1. And when you are in the left-hand lane and you make that sweeping right turn, in theory at least, you're supposed to be
Supposed to go to
ending
the
up
interior
in the
lane.
next lane over
Right.
on 213.
In reality, you wind up crushing the car next to you that did
Exactly.
the same movement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your point
that's
being,
true.
it's hard to separate. It's hard to allow one
Lane without allowing
without
the
allowing
other.
the other. So, yeah.
Well, actually, the whole signage and lines there is all mixed up.
At
Because,
Prairie Schooner Way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you're coming up Prairie Schooner in your far left lane, it would make sense for the lines to allow you to go over onto 213 into its far left lane. But it doesn't. It makes you go into the center lane. So you're going from the left turn lane to the center lane. And the other person on the right-hand side has to make a sharp turn to stay to the far right. And then he's stuck and he has to try to get back over to continue on 213. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain unless you actually are there to see the signage.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I haven't had time to really kind of get out there and look at that.
Shame upon you.
I know. We'll get better down there before our next
Tough
meeting.
crowd.
That's our shortcut to the top of the hill. Marine City.
Item 3, the follow-up from attendance at the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting. I did attend the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting, so Paul was here at our last meeting to kind of ask that happen and had some real concerns about neighborhood speeding. And so I was able to get to that meeting, and I asked Paul, I said, boy, Paul, it'd be nice if I could hear from somebody besides you. I've already heard your story, and it didn't quite work out that way, but there was a few others that were willing to kind of speak up as well about some of their concerns. And, I think Paul's point was that, that there's all this right-of-way that's unimproved right-of-way, and feeling like the city ought to do more to clean up that right-of-way. And I don't know, we looked at that. If people have frontage requirements to maintain their own frontage, whether it's improved or not improved. Well, more likely if it's not improved right away, that's definitely when it's theirs to maintain. But there's also a lot of not vacated but unimproved right away in and through the Kenema neighborhood, because the way it was platted, there's these streets that they're too steep to have any street on them, but they're still right away. So in those areas, just drive-by kind of review of those. There were several that could use some trimming, and those are kind of our responsibility. So I think Martin put a work order together, and they've since kind of dealt with most of that. And that combined with the other thing, which was confirming that, well, not confirming. I think there's this implication that there's lots of vehicles that are just flying through the neighborhood. And it's one of those neighborhoods, I don't know if you've driven through it, but it's a challenge to speed through Kenema.
Yeah.
I mean, you really got to work to do that.
Yeah, I drove from South End Road,
Yeah, South End Road, you can
and then you
go.
take Fifth,
Right?
Yeah.
and I came in there, and I wasn't, paying attention. I thought, came around that first little corner. I mean, you had to do 20, 25. I mean, you could not go any faster than that.
There's one straightaway right in front of Paul's house, and we think we've got enough open tree coverage or lacking tree coverage there, I guess, to where we could probably get that sign or speed signage with the what am I thinking of?
Mobile radar detection device.
Yeah, those are solar powered. So try and get find a place there we can remind people, put it on a rotation, and just, maybe that'll be an effective traffic control device there. But, I know there's some cut-through traffic there just because it's a way to get from 99E up to South End Road, but man, it's an odd route. So
Yeah.
I would think that there's probably a few that do that. But so that's kind of some of our solutions. I think the neighborhood seemed happy with the response, and I think they'd still like to see us come up with a policy for how we would implement the kind of the new allowance for 20-mile-an-hour signage in neighborhoods. But we know once we do that in one neighborhood, we want to have some pretty some criteria there by which we make those decisions. And so we have yet to do that, but I think that's on our work plan at some point in time to kind of
John?
figure that out.
Does the city still have the traffic counters that will check for speed as well as?
We do
counts?
have the capability to do internal tubular traffic counts.
Yeah.
We have an alternative that we're looking at. My concern is if I put something out that the general public knows what that is, you're going to get somebody that's trying to prove a point.
Well, yes, but having used those machines and having in the past taken traffic counts out in that area, I would suggest that you could get a handle on the extent of the problem by putting out those.
We think we have another solution
Yeah.
that just
Oh, I
the
love
problem with those traffic
Same data, different method.
Yeah. Traffic counters, generally, especially if there's a neighborhood that's we see higher counts, we see,
Been
people
there.
backing over them multiple times, those kinds of things. So we're just trying to avoid that little problem.
Yeah.
Send the kids out with a hammer.
like we said, we believe we have an alternative that will get us the results, the data that we want, not necessarily the results that we want. That will either validate or disprove some of the information that we're hearing. And one thing I just want to clarify with the unimproved right-of-ways, we are making some efforts to bring up the edges of the unimproved right-of-way. So if you've got two adjacent properties with an unimproved right-of-way running between them, we're just cleaning up so that we'll push the brush back to the edge of the other adjacent property. We are not clear-cutting or going through the complete unimproved right-of-way.
That's
just
good
not
clarification. Yeah.
That's not something that's feasible.
Okay, next item.
Okay.
So just TriMet, I think I've mentioned this to you before. TriMet is actually coming to the next work session in January. I want to say that's January 7th. So I guess I'd request that you folks show up for that, or at least watch it after the fact, if you're, because I know many of you are interested in TriMet services in Oregon City, and really kind of in the South Corridor. So that'll be a work session to remind you about. The other thing that I wanted to mention about is last week I went to a kickoff meeting for the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail Bus Service Plan. They call it the PMLR. Is that right?
Portland
Yeah,
Light Rail.
PMLR Startup Service Plan. And TriMet is proposing to study bus services after the light rail in Milwaukee is serviced and ready to go. So they're looking for public input on that plan. They're also working on the Southeast Service Enhancement Plan, which is the whole corridor as it kind of leaves south of the Milwaukee light rail station and comes out 99E. It's a pretty wide, so it goes through Milwaukee and Gladstone, and comes to Oregon City. It also goes a little further east towards Happy Valley as well. So that both of those plans are happening kind of congruently, and they're obviously wanting agency input, but they're also looking for community members, and I think informed community members about the bus service needs, someone who can convey what the community feels or needs. They're going to have lots of ways to provide input, just like on most of these, which they've yet to establish. They don't have a website yet, but they're just kind of seeking out agencies and how, if we had any suggestions for maybe how they should do that effort. And so one of the things that I suggested was I kind of like the model that the Oregon Passenger Rail group has put together with online surveys, open houses, coming up with a couple different community forums, whether it be agency people, electeds, or just community members. I think a couple of you sat on that. Was that you, Blaine, that sat on the Oregon Passenger Rail?
Yes.
Did you sit on that forum? Yeah. So I don't know exactly what they're going to come up with, but they're starting to reach out to communities like Oregon City to really try to figure out where, what kind of input the city has with regard to the kind of service that they maybe can provide. I mean, they have some limitations on funding, so there's a limit to what they can provide, but they want to hear from the public. So that's a positive step, I think, in the right direction.
They wanting input on rail alignment or on services that we can provide as a city to rail passengers?
Not rail alignment. This is all about bus service.
Bus
Service. So, and the focus is just things are going to change for their busing because of the MAX line, the new Milwaukee line. And they gave me a schedule. Looks like they're trying to solicit needs and through spring of 2014. I think that's their main point, and then gather up some of that information, kind of push it back out during the summer of 2014, and then develop their plan after that. So that's coming along, and this committee is probably, I think it would make sense. Maybe we'd add this to the agenda in January just to see if the committee wants to elect a subcommittee or a couple of members that might track that a little closer.
And with your permission, I'd like to interject here at this point about the rail. That I jump in real quick?
Go ahead.
Okay. Joyce Gifford, William's wife, is heading up the volunteer program for the train depot. And so most of the time when they put an ad out for these programs, volunteer programs, they get 100 or more volunteers. So the goal will be to greet every passenger, both arriving and departing, and to direct them and help them find wherever they need to go, or tickets, or however, just to instruct them on how to connect from one place to another and so forth. Joyce went to Lacey, Washington, and spent some time. They took some video of their and talked to the folks there about their program. And she was told that once that program was instituted, that rail passenger counts, I think the term she used was skyrocketed. So people became more familiar, more comfortable, and so I think that's something we need to keep our eye on. We hope to have the station open, activated by this spring, but she wants to get the volunteer program started earlier. So
Is there bus service there?
well, and there is. Well, not anymore because they added two more trains.
I'm talking about, does TriMet make a
No,
stop?
but that was why I wanted to interject that was one of the thoughts that in Lacey, they actually changed their, to where there was bus service there at that station. And so I don't know, if it would be feasible or even desirable to move the, transit station down in proximity, if that might be crowding things. But anyway.
I like to see TriMet not run those big, huge buses, maybe the next size down, the little shorter ones. And they get around town and wouldn't block so much traffic, and, run maybe two more extras or something like that. Get rid of those big ones. Make it easier. This town's hard to drive.
Well, they could do the little ones in town, but basically like the 33 runs all the way
Yeah, but I mean, like
through
if you want,
northeast, downtown, to northeast.
like a big one goes from the transit center on, but the little ones just to take care of all the short streets up here. And
Yeah, there's more discussion to come on TriMet. I think other agencies are clamoring the same concern we have, which is, the services that we have are are great. You know, it's getting people to and from the community college and through downtown. We've got, you know, there's good service along Malala Avenue and Lynn Avenue, but there's places other than those, and so how we serve those areas and providing, you know, maybe supplement to that. So Lake Oswego, for instance, has the Merrillhurst, it's not a community center, it's the resident center there. They're now running free of charge, and you can wave them down, kind of a bus service between Merrillhurst and Oregon City. And so that's kind of a unique thing that's not well advertised. And you know, is there other vendors like that, or other, you know, retirement centers? Maybe there's a bus program that could kind of work. You know, does the school district have the opportunity to, when its buses are running empty? You know, I don't know what those solutions are, but I think that's, you know, ride share is another possibility. So
I see the Canby, the CAT is running all the way up to the hospital.
they won't stop for Oregon City, though.
No, but I see them go all the way to the hospital now.
Yeah.
They do deliveries for residents that have medical or, you know, they have to have special needs.
They're actually serving the Willamette Hospital extension down in Canby then.
Oh.
Do you know that?
No, I'm just surmising from her statement.
Oh.
So riders need to be from Canby then, or that general vicinity?
Yeah, you have to be from Canby
Or going
Yeah.
to Canby.
to book a special ride to Oregon City, you know, and you have to be,
Well,
it has to be a medical need.
But
really? I mean, they come to the transfer station.
They
so-
do that, but everything else, they used to go up.
So I'm wondering if you're at the
Yeah.
transfer station and you
Yeah,
need a
it's
ride
okay.
up to the hospital, can you get one from CAT, or does it have to
I
be
wouldn't think you
special
could get one from
arrangement?
CAT. You could probably get one from TriMet, because that's the TriMet service district.
Well, I guess that's another uncertain area, but basically, more discussion about transit service in Oregon City is coming your way, so.
Steve, if I could just make a comment. Listening to that, it sounds like there's private, nonprofit, city, and TriMet type of transportation available, but do we know how well they are coordinated and connected amongst themselves? And that might be a role for this committee some point down the line, where we have a work session and invite all these providers, private and others, come in. And maybe you've done that in the past year, but and maybe there'll be a couple of, even if we found like half a dozen obvious connection points, if they would just stretch their service, it would, you know, have a multiplier effect.
My sense is the first step would be to apply for a grant through TriMet. TriMet's offering some of these grants. The problem is none of them are long-term. You know, they're like a one-year pilot program, and then after that you got to figure out how to sustain that service. So I know, you know.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily talking about adding new service, maybe just a new alignment so you can match up or something like that. Maybe that's already being done, but it'd be good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Item 5 is I don't know if you all reviewed the packet, but there's a letter and some background information on Congressman Earl Blumenauer's proposal to. I don't think it's just his proposal, but he's supporting this idea of finding transportation revenues through increases in the federal gas tax. And you know, I'm going to go through this regional transportation plan. I mean, update. So that's my presentation that I want to rehearse with you folks. But you know, federal funding is not looking real strong when it comes to transportation. Yet the transportation needs are really pretty high. So this is something I'm not sure. I know at one point they were asking for the city commission to support this. I don't know if we're going to go get that, but we're not going to oppose it at this point in time. So anyway, I think, you know, there's been a lot of groups that have looked at raising the federal gas taxes. It hasn't been raised in a very long time, yet there's obviously opposition to that as well. So where that goes, I'm not sure, but we want to include it in your packet since they sent this letter to the city for, I guess, trying to remember, this came by way of, I think this may have come by way of Metro, and just kind of looking for agency support, local agency support. So,
Well, taxing and mileage, the cars still roll across the roads, and you take the Priuses and electric cars are almost running free on the roads. They're not being taxed for
Based on
what their
mileage.
mileage. So mileage is about and to me, I don't care mileage. I'd come out ahead because I don't drive my big truck or my cars that much. So
yeah. When I buy my Tesla, I'm not going to have to pay a dime for road maintenance.
Unless you strike a piece of metal on the road and it explodes.
pull up to Fred Meyer's and charge up in the lot.
Well, he'd have to use his own electricity.
You could drive the same car then.
I wasn't.
You guys getting pay raises? I'm not, because that car costs $100,000. I've researched it.
And
That's how much they cost, the Teslas?
$98,000 starting
$98,000.
base.
And the batteries
That's
get
for the fast model.
Yeah,
No,
no,
that's
no.
the base model.
No, it's-
The base is 98. They have a showroom over at Washington Square Mall. When my wife wasn't here, I spent an entire afternoon drooling in there.
So,
It's a
John,
gorgeous piece of engineering.
are you going to give us rides?
Sure.
All right.
All right. So
Does
I
it have a
think,
remote
I think that
start?
completes the my report.
Okay.
Is there anything, Martin? We were going to talk about a couple things. You want to?
An update for you guys. It was an item that you guys actually brought up to us about 6 months ago about the irregularity of the speeds along Washington Avenue, starting at Abernathy, going through the Jug Handle, and then over to Clackamas River Road. We got a speed analysis completed by the state with recommendations for normalizing the speeds through there. And operations staff started the work today, and we should have it finished sometime tomorrow.
So it'll be 55 all the way through?
No. To give you an idea, and I'll just kind of run through this, the report itself is a little confusing at times, but from Abernathy all the way out to Prairie Schooner Way, you've got a mixture of 35 miles an hour and then a section that on ODOT's records is 45 miles an hour, but it's posted 25, and it's not properly posted. So that will be going, the section that is 35 will be staying 35, and then just in front of the end of the trail center going out to Prairie Schooner Way, that will all go to 30 miles an hour. So we're actually reducing from what ODOT has on record, but increasing slightly from what's posted out there. Prairie Schooner Way will now have an official speed limit because it technically does not. It's non-posted, so default there is 55. That will be going to 30 miles an hour. Then Clackamas River Drive on the backside of the roundabout, all of that will transition to a 30 mile an hour zone. So, and then the 30 mile an hour will extend to Forsyth Road. Okay, so all of the inconsistencies, it was 35, then 25, then back to 40. All that's leveling out and is normalizing. So again, staff will have that finished. We got about halfway done with it today, and we'll finish up the other leg of it tomorrow.
What is it from the roundabout past the gas station to I-205? What is it there?
That's actually, let's see, Clackamas River Drive to 203, yeah, to 213, posted 40, and that will be reduced to 30 miles an hour.
Makes sense because you can't go really that fast.
Yeah, you're speeding up to get nowhere. So,
Because the traffic backs up to the gas station all the
You're
time.
speeding up to get it to no right turn on
no,
red.
no right turn on red. Yeah. So that will actually go down to 30 miles an hour.
Can we point out that this also addresses that the property owner, the Mr. Tractor Man,
Oh, yeah.
Which he
Yeah.
did get his tractor signed, by the way.
but he wanted the speed reduced
Yeah.
in that section. So
Well, actually, he wanted the speed reduced just on the backside, right there between Melinda and Forsyth.
but we got the speed studies, the entirety done.
Well, here's the
One
thing.
fell
That
swoop.
section where he's currently concerned about, that was another part of that leg where ODOT records are 40 miles an hour. That's what the official record is. It was posted 25 and never really elevated while we were doing the construction project. And that will be going to 30 miles an hour. So it's normalized going through the entire length of it, but his concern is he wanted it even lower because he's got tractors going across the road at that area. Speed study didn't support the information and the outcome that he wanted. So if you guys are interested in the raw data, I'd be happy to provide it for you. It's a great cure for insomnia. So let us know.
He might invest in a couple flaggers.
No.
So does that mean, Martin, the speed limit stays 30 all the way to the city limits? Because he was,
It's 35, just right there at Abernathy and Washington until you get to just about 1.12 miles away from Abernathy, which puts you right in front of the end of the trail center.
no, on the other end.
Oh, on the other end, it will be 30 miles an hour until you get to Forsyth Road.
And then it goes to 40.
Then it's 40. And then from there, it transitions outside of our jurisdiction. As you head further out, it hits a speed of 55, I believe. There's an unposted out there. Well, you know, if it's unposted,
Motorcraft.
It's
Based
posted-
on the
it's
use of the
posted out-
road.
It's posted out to Carver Bridge at 45.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just after Forsyth, it extends beyond our jurisdiction, and then it's Clackamas County.
I'd like to thank you for getting that done. That's a wonderful job of consistency there. That's great.
The credit goes to our streets division with Kevin Hanks and to Eric Walgren, one of our engineers who really ran this down. So we just hang stuff.
Good.
Good job.
Quick follow-up question. When you change speeds like that, do you put some kind of warning sign?
Actually,
on
there
the
is a
other
warning
side?
sign that's going out saying change in traffic pattern. And that was
Okay.
posted today, and I made a phone call to our police department for traffic enforcement. We don't want a speed trap. We don't want anybody, being targeted. But I do need to make them aware that this speed
Yeah.
through that area has altered, and they'll react accordingly. They're not going to go out there and they're not hurting for revenue. So, okay.
I appreciate filling in that in front of the welding supply. Smooth the road out so
Oh.
it isn't
No problem.
so low right there. It was a kind of a ridge there when you come through there with a big vehicle.
Where at?
In front of the welding supply where they
Oh,
extended the
On the shoulder.
the shoulder and
Yeah.
it sunk.
so that's the end of that report.
Okay. 6C, Newell Creek Canyon Mountain Bike Trail presentation.
Well, I'll just give a brief outline of what we're doing. The Oregon City Trail Alliance was formed in 2012, and its mission is to develop, maintain, and promote a network system of bike and ped trails in Oregon City. And so we want to encourage personal health and safety, environmental stewardship, and economic vitality. On that economic vitality piece, we're not only looking to connect trails like the Oregon City Loop and other things, but really looking at what ways can we use trail systems in Oregon City to bring economic vitality. One of those projects is the Newell Creek Canyon. And really the development of Newell Creek Canyon, and do all of you know where Newell Creek Canyon is? You're okay, so everyone's good with that. The development of that is really designed to bring tourism, hikers, but in particular cyclists. Cyclotourism is a huge industry, And in the handout I gave you, I have stats. I won't go into those. But the stats for that, the demographic, I believe it's is it 30 to 55. But anyway, it doesn't matter. They bring, these mountain bikers bring a lot of dollars with them that when they ride, they also spend in our restaurants and hotels and so forth. Sandy Ridge, the last I read, Sandy Ridge is a trail system out in Sandy, and they bring 50 to 70,000 riders each year. Being in close to Oregon City, we anticipate that would easily exceed that number. But Newell Creek Canyon is largely owned by Metro. Oregon City owns some pieces of it, and there are a couple of private developers. It's, depending on what you read, it's between 350 and 400 acres. It's a sensitive watershed area, and it also is a slide area. As you know, that the Newell Creek Apartments, the lowest apartment complex, just about slid off the mountain. They had to tear it down. So, the environmental groups are eager to get some kind of recreation in that as an impediment to future development, and to draw attention to that area and to make it accessible to citizens and tourists. So we've had conversations with Metro, and Metro has indicated that developing a trail system in Newell Creek Canyon is a top priority. And so what they've been looking for are a couple of things. One is local. Oh, Santa Claus has arrived. You're a little early.
Oh, no, we start at 6.
We start at 6.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm embarrassed. I thought I started at 7.
Well, come on
I'm
in.
so proud that I was here early.
The water's warm.
We've still got a few more topics.
I'm proud of you for dressing like Santa.
Typecasting.
So what Metro's looking for, they want to see a groundswell of support. They don't want to start into a project that doesn't have local support. And they also are looking for $50,000 to do a master plan to work with organizations like Northwest Trail Alliance, the International Mountain Biking Association. These are expert trail builders that know how to work in sensitive watershed areas. And so we met with Dan Moeller, and most recently with Janet Bebb, who's the Metro Principal Regional Planner. And I love her comment. She said that given the level of interest and support for this project locally, she believes an initial trail system could be in place by 2016. So that's pretty exciting. Let's see. So to date, we've led 4 hikes into the canyon, and brought our little GPS to try and map. You'll see on the last page of the handout, it's a pretty rough.
Where is that?
It's not in there. We handed it out.
It's not a real. I wish I had an overhead or a PowerPoint, but as you can see in the lower right-hand corner,
Yeah.
that's Beaver Creek Road where it meets 213 on the far right there. And then you'll notice the little squiggly marks. You can see the very small, it says Newell Creek Apartments. And then the big hook here, that's we came down from Nelson Nautilus. So, and we felt like we were hiking all day. So you can see that this,
It's pretty steep.
it comes all the way here. And so we spent 2 hours hiking around, and we barely scratched the surface. So it's a huge area. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Ogden Middle School. And we dropped in from there. There's a trail there, and we literally hiked 2 hours, and that's all the further, those dark black lines, that's all the further we covered.
Blaine?
Yeah.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
You've got several points here that have circles about them, and then you have some points that have
your
X's
name.
through them. Can that have any significance, or?
Well, it does. We marked every point where there could be a potential entry point into the canyon. And so as we go through, we start Xing them off that it's not in fact an entry. So the main entry, if you go into Newell Creek Canyon behind Nelson's Nautilus, you'll hike down maybe about 100 yards, and then you can split off to the right to the Beaver Creek Apartments, or split left, and you'll see a substantial fence with an area where you can go through, hikers can go through, and there is evidence of mountain bikers in there that probably just lift them over. But it's beautiful. I mean, it is just awesome in there. And there's a huge canopy and oak and just beautiful stuff. So creeks running through there. It's just a wonderful place. And largely unknown by most people. I mean, half the people I talk to in Oregon City don't even know where it is.
If I may, I have some intimate knowledge of this. Sure. And the fact that I live right across the street from it. There's a note in the middle on the bottom that says Bank of the West. See where the intersection of Warner Millie and Molalla?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little street down the end there, and I live at the end of that street. And is this on? And there's considerable foot traffic. Unfortunately, it's probably what you would consider less than desirable of folks that wandered down into that canyon. There's a number of people that are living down in there. It'll be interesting to see what impact the trail system has on that. We also, because of that proximity, we also have some squatters now living in the house directly behind us that I've just called the police about tonight. So it's that is an issue, and I'm hoping, I mentioned this with former Police Chief Conrad years ago about if we can get some trail system in there, hopefully shining some light on that will help those other people find some other arrangements.
Well, and from our 4 hikes in, and by the way, we led several members of the Clackamas Community College Foundation, and also the school board. Ron Adams came along, and so there's considerable interest at Clackamas Community College in not only Newell Creek Canyon, but also the Environmental Learning Center. Those are the headwaters of Newell Creek Canyon. And so, building, I think they've gotten a grant to build some basic filtering system to filter out the gray water that goes into Newell Creek. But there's a patchwork of trails in there. None of them are official, but there's also a number of invasive species, and there's another organization, I believe it's the Greater
Oregon City Watershed Alliance.
I think they've organized some efforts there. As William mentioned, we found several vagrant camps. A lot of them are along 213. And so if you come down from Beaver Creek, or across 213, you go up, there's a little path that goes up. There are 5 or 6 there. So what we'd like to do, with also shopping carts and garbage, and we'd really like to Oregon City Trail Alliance would like to organize a group of people from the city to go in and clean that up. So I wanted to read something that Janet Bebb wrote to me a couple of weeks ago, and I was very encouraged by this email. She said, "We'll start scoping this project the first of the year, 2014, and I'll be in touch about getting together to get your ideas, who we should talk with." So she wants to get an initial committee group, and we definitely like representatives from TAC to be there. And then it says, "I've copied our new planning manager, Mark Davison, and mentioned to him that you have a network of people interested in the project. We should be in full swing with this process this spring. I'm looking forward to it." That's huge. I just can't express that enough. So, what else? The first goal in this process would be to form a metro committee. And then, continue our mapping efforts, keep building consensus. That's been an important thing for us, that we don't want to launch into a project and then suddenly you have all these people saying, "Wait, you can't do that." So we've been really working hard to build consensus and visioning together. And of course, once the master plan is put into place, that'll be a huge process. I mean, all the public hearings and public input. So we want to, again, organize cleanup efforts, explore grant writing, develop a master plan, and start trail building in 2015. as far as the Oregon City Trail Alliance, our motto is that, you know, if an environmentally sustainable trail system cannot be built in Newell Creek Canyon, then we don't really want to be part of the project. So that we're going to insist that it be done right. And there's a video out. This is called Pedal Driven. We encourage you to read it because I think this committee will be more involved in this as it develops. But this is a video about the outlaw mountain bikers. And what we're proposing in Newell Creek Canyon is a separate trail system. Forest Park has a multi-use where mountain bikers and hikers are on the same trail. Not really good, problematic. So we're proposing that there be separate trail systems and one designated single track for the mountain bikers. That will draw the tourists. But this is a great video that talks about the conflict between the mountain bikers and the U.S. Forest Service up in Leavenworth, Washington. And they found it's all hugs and sunshine at the end because they found that they can work together if they plan. Everybody's happy. So I really encourage that. You've seen it, haven't you, John? Yeah. So I guess that's really all I have to share. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, Blaine, I'll offer for you, when you want to do some more reconnoitering, if you want some topo maps, we've got good LiDAR data that we can
That's
get you
just
some
what I was
topo
going to
maps.
ask. Are these the best maps that you can get of the area? There's got to be better maps.
I think I
than
tore it
that.
out of the back of a phone book or something. I don't know.
Let me know when you're going hiking down there, and we'll
Okay, that would
see
really
what
be
we
helpful.
can do to help you.
Yeah, and how large can those?
I think we have them on 2-foot contours. And
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, well, 2-foot contours will tell you the gradation.
Okay.
How large you want the map is however large you want the map. I can do 36 by 48 inch.
Okay.
I
That would be-
should say our team
We
Yeah.
can do that because I'm not
USGS
capable
does
of
those
doing that.
as well, don't they, Martin?
I'm sorry?
USGS provides topos as well, don't they?
They do, but the ones that you can purchase are sometimes limited to certain areas, and the quality of theirs in terms of just pixels, some of those are a little limited at times. So we have good LiDAR data for the city, and I believe it covers the canyon. I'll have to verify for you. Yeah.
Once you get the trail, that Google will go through and do a street
Yeah.
view.
And we keep
Yeah.
them in two variable sets. We have a 10-foot LiDAR, so what it'll do is a topo line every 10-foot gradation change.
Mhm.
And then we have 2-foot LiDAR. 2-foot LiDAR much more detailed, but depending on if you're in a very steep area, it's a lot of clutter. So,
Yeah,
but
that would be
It's a little
that'd be great.
tough to follow with the tree coverage too,
Yeah.
because
Right.
somehow they interpolate that. If it's too tree covered, then it's kind of hard to tell. But,
Yeah.
but
Well,
you've
and
seen
I
our
might-
mapping. We've got good.
I might add too that one of the in this particular part of the Newell Creek system is you'll see this on the regional, the metropolitan area, the Vancouver, Portland metropolitan area. You'll see that on their trail system. You'll see it on Intertwine. You'll see it on Clackamas County, and that is the commuter trail that would connect Lower Oregon City with Upper Oregon City, and how that. Typically, you see it following the old Willamette Valley Southern rail, although the trestles are gone. But that rail system, I did have a map in there that you can see that runs from 15th and 99E across following along the Abernathy, and then across where 213 is now crossed. And there were some trestles that went up.
It went behind Maple Lane School.
Exactly.
And you can look in there, you can still see the cut.
Yes.
And it went up on the college campus behind the old Smuckers building.
Exactly.
And across. You can see over there at the college, you can walk and see where the rail bed was.
Brian Boyce and I walked down 213 on the east side, and right where it opens up, you can see the PG lines going across. So we went down and followed that road up, going east, and then we ended up. It's I would say probably about a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile, of just right through the forest, just straight as an arrow, and you know that's exactly where it went. But I would imagine it's going to be problematic because those homes are. And most of that land, I think, is probably reverted back to home ownership. So, but-
Steve, a question for Blaine. Blaine, you talked about a grant, and could you tell us, is that a requirement that you get that local match the 50,000, or how was that? I wasn't quite clear.
no, it's one of those things that initially, Janet had said that one of the sticking points to this project is that master plan is going to cost, probably a minimum of $50,000, and Metro doesn't have it in their budget. So I said, well, we stood out after we walked through the canyon. We stood out behind Nelson's Nautilus, and there were about maybe 15 of us in a circle, and some of them from the college. And so people were just bouncing back and forth saying, well, we could do this grant and that grant, in other words. So I think once we get the process going, we'll probably be able to write a grant to get that master plan done. I'm hoping, praying. So it seems like that's not, when the trolley bridge feasibility is like granted $250,000, I'm thinking $50,000 doesn't sound like that much, but what do I know?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to mention, just to give you an idea on what cycle tourism can do for Oregon City, and these are recent statistics. $400 million was spent in Oregon. This is cycle tourism. $400 million was spent in Oregon in 2012. Of that $400 million, $46 million was spent in Hood River Gorge area. $46 million. And so cycle tourists are 65% men, 35% women. 72% of them are between the ages of 35 and 64. So you're not talking about kids. So this is something, 77% of these people have bachelor degrees. 50% have incomes of $75,000 to $200,000. 73% live in Oregon. $20.3 million spent on lodging and food in Oregon.
Yeah, it could be.
So, this is about heads and beds and money for the local economy. So I think it's a great project, and it'd be great if this committee could, participate in the development.
Well, I'd like to just suggest, I'm sure it goes without saying, to have Blaine be our official tax representative on that project, so he can keep us informed of what we need to do to support it.
I'd be glad to do that. I want a pay raise, though.
How about
Give you all the free air you want outside.
Yeah, we could double it.
How about 5%?
5%. Anybody wants to borrow this?
I would.
As long as you get it back to me.
I've seen it, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, you can find it on Netflix streaming too.
Is it at Netflix?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a pedal driven.
Okay, number 6.
Do you have any extra copies?
I gave you one.
6D, Regional Transportation System Plan Presentation.
Martin has one. We can make copies of Martin.
I'm sorry.
He said he gave me one.
Looks like
I
we're
just-
gonna have.
I don't know.
What do you need?
I gave
Put him
one.
up
I'm
there.
looking.
Writing.
See you today.
All right, I'm going to grab the controls here.
It didn't time out, did it, John?
No.
It's there.
If you can't find it, I gave you one.
So this is a presentation that I've yet to rehearse, but it's scheduled on tomorrow's commission agenda as well. So
It's your practice.
Popcorn.
this is my practice.
We're gonna be hard on you.
I do want to.
You gotta sit down.
Here, he's fine.
Thanks.
That was his.
Yeah, that was yours. I stole it this morning.
Week start.
I stole this from your office
Sure,
earlier
well.
today.
You don't have your tie on.
Special
I
plan.
don't. You're right.
This isn't a dress
I
rehearsal.
have my own special.
No, not a dress rehearsal, just a rehearsal. So I'm going to try to see how quickly I can get through this. I'm going to try and fly through it. So if you guys don't mind, just holding your questions to the end, if you can. I know this is a tough group to hold back, but I'm going to try to get through this. So
Excuse me, John. No.
go ahead. See, you got me.
I'm gonna watch the monitor here. When you push,
So I've titled this Regional Transportation System Planning. It's a bit of a shell game. And I would say this about regional transportation planning. This is probably the one area that I had very little experience when I moved into this position. Nancy did the lion's share of the regional transportation planning, and I attended a few meetings when she was not able to attend those meetings. But this has been interesting to me because there's a lot going on with transportation planning right now. And maybe it's always been that way, but for me it feels like the workload is just tremendously high. So the piece about the shell game, to me, it just seems that way because there's so many players. It's not always clear what your goals and objectives are. It's not always clear who you need to talk to when you do that. You're going to interrupt me on the first slide, aren't you, William?
If I may, and I apologize, but I want you to get off on the right foot. And it's just a humble suggestion that shell game implies some sort of dishonesty. And I think what you really mean to say it's a bit of a moving target. And I'd say moving target would have a more positive spin on your public audience than a shell game, which sounds like they're trying to hide something. Just a thought.
That messes up my whole thing with regard to, you'll see my theme as it moves forward, but maybe if I just point out that I'm not implying.
There you go.
Maybe.
Not implying
Okay,
a-
how's that? All right. So I want to go through just a general overview of what I think the game is, who the players are, some of the key plays, what's Oregon City's hand look like, and what's the current score. So, and then kind of a side note, but something I also want to give the City Commission and you folks an update on is the Oregon Passenger Rail and some information that I got at the last meeting that I went to for that. So, I really do this as believe this is a regional effort to do our best to ensure that we spend our transportation dollars in the right places, that we have a transportation network that works for all modes of travel. And I think that's what the region is trying to get to. I believe that's what Metro is trying to get to. I know they have their believers and their disbelievers when it comes to regional government, but I think that's really what's going on here. This region is projected to grow. Numbers I heard most of these planning documents are looking about 25 years out, and 25 years out, this Portland metro region's supposed to be near 1.9 million people. The number of jobs are supposed to double. We've got more diversity, economic activity, and more travel, more infrastructure to maintain. So planning makes sense. A lot of people are impatient with it, but this is a long-range plan, so keep that in mind. There's a variety of themes that I think help guide these plans and this planning effort. It's my understanding of these regional themes they're kind of the common threads that stitch all this stuff together. And so, improved air quality is something that I hadn't necessarily associated with transportation planning, but it's the main driver, to be honest with you, is air quality. Reduced congestion, that's mostly because we all complain about being stuck in traffic. Land use is a big component of transportation, and why it makes sense for Metro to be involved in that, because they do so much in regards to land use in the metro area. So while I don't agree with everything they do, I think the themes make sense. There's other themes that you see in all the work that's kind of come out of this the region with transportation, whether it be at the local level or at the state level or at the federal level. So vibrant communities, economic prosperity, safe and reliable transportation systems, clean air and water. Equity is kind of a new one. Are we spending the dollars in the right way to provide transportation options for those that don't necessarily have a lot of options? So obviously the federal government's the biggest player. We talked about that earlier in the meeting with regard to that letter that Congressman Blumenauer has sent out with the idea of raising gas taxes. There have been some big initiatives that have come out of the federal government, and that's really that funding trickles down to local governments in the form of grants and other projects that the state has done for us. So they're obviously the biggest funding source. They also establish and help ensure that some of those themes that I showed you in the previous slides kind of come to fruition. The state is clearly the lead player in the state of Oregon and any other state, but they, their mission is to provide safe, efficient transportation systems that support the economic opportunity and livability of Oregonians. at times I struggle with how we get to there, but they also have strategic plans for how transportation dollars should be spent, where the focus should be. Their themes are not much different than the themes that I've showed you that the federal government brings forward. It's the State Transportation Commission. That's a small group of people who make a lot of important decisions about how transportation funding is spent. They're the ones that issue the statute and the rules on how to spend that money. And then the Oregon Department of Transportation, which is really the ones that we deal with mostly, they're pretty focused on the interstate, on the highway systems, safety. We're seeing, more and more of those dollars that are available through the state. They're wanting to control that money, and but I think their control is well intended. Keep it focused on where the accidents are, and as we all kind of gather data and better know how to use that data, I see them using it wisely. So I don't want to beat up the state too much on that. Metro, everybody loves Metro. Sometimes. I think Metro struggles with distinctiveness. I think they have a bit of an identity crisis. They manage the zoo, they manage cemeteries, they manage solid waste, and they do a multitude of land use planning. So they are the regional planners for the metro area. The Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, that's JPAC. I don't know if you've heard of that group before, but that's the group that oversees the region with regard to transportation decisions. So if you go to a JPAC meeting at the table, you'll see representatives from each of the counties, and each of the 3 counties. You'll see ODOT's obviously there, TriMet's there. That's become a pretty political group, and they're more and more as the limited funds get tighter and tighter. They're scrutinizing those decisions more and more. They're also putting together, I think, good programs for how you kind of get so that their decision has essentially been made pretty much for them by the time it gets to them. We currently don't have a commissioner who's on the JPAC committee. It's represented by another city and the county. There's also the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, which is more of the planning group. But planning and transportation go hand in hand together. So again, those are 2 pretty important groups that I believe our city commission is pretty well tuned into. The counties, I think Washington County is even though it's kind of the newer, well, it's always been a county, but I mean, it's the population there and their infrastructure is newer. They're leading the way. A lot of that's got to do with the fact that they've got the industry in their town or in their county, and so they've kind of come around to figuring it out. I would say a lot more than Clackamas County has. And Multnomah County is pretty much led by Portland, so Multnomah County doesn't seem to have the stake that Washington County does. At least that's my opinion. Again, these are kind of my observations as I've learned a few things about what's moving forward. But I just see Washington County having their corridor plans, having their ducks in a row when it comes time to look for funding. Whereas Clackamas County, I think they're kind of chomping at the bit a little bit to try to get moving in that direction. I believe they're coming around to that. But they're still, opposed to a lot of things that that may or may not be good things for the metro region, whether it be rail or high capacity transit. It's hard to know. I think that's the biggest problem with Clackamas County is it's really hard to know what they're saying. Who is it that's speaking for Clackamas County? And lots of times the cities aren't always on the same page as the counties as well. So, and then the other little piece is unincorporated Clackamas County. They're like the city of Clackamas. Lots of times I see it that way, and so more often than not, we see them, as competing with city needs as opposed to supporting the overall county. Transit agencies, whether it be TriMet or SMART or others, those are usually at the table. Special interest groups, I think of as bike advocacy groups, business alliance groups. If you're into, if there's groups out there about environmental protection, Coalition for Livable Communities. I mean, health has a role in transportation planning. We're seeing more and more of that. The argument being made that it's healthy to walk, it's healthy to bike, it's healthy to get out of your car. So there's special interest groups for that as well. So the state has several plays, I guess I would say. The OTIA is something that came about a few years ago. The Jobs and Transportation Act is something that funded the Jug Handle project, if you remember that. Connect Oregon is another more recent funding mechanism that the state uses. The flexible funds, regional flexible funds, if you remember those were state. We applied for some of those funds, didn't get them, but they actually allocate those to Metro, and Metro kind of deals with that. But they're the ones who kind of hand that off to Metro.
JPACT, right?
Through the JPACT,
Right.
yeah. States, transportation, growth management, they're big into that, and they're big into planning as well. Metro does our regional transportation plan, which is really kind of what I'm wanting to talk about. But I wanted to put it in the context of kind of how it works, from what I can tell. Other ancillary documents or maybe the Climate Smart Communities Plan isn't necessarily an ancillary document. It's more of a, what I wanted to, see, what did I want to say about this? So it's more of a functional plan. It helps guide, for instance, the RTP plan. Maybe not this time around because it's not written yet or it's not adopted yet, but in the future it's going to be more of a plan that will help guide future decisions with regard to the RTP. Active Transportation Plan, well, that's about biking and getting out of your cars, walking, other modes of transportation besides driving. Corridor planning, they sponsor model plans, whether we're hearing about it now in Tigard and on the west side where I think they call that the Southwest Corridor Plan. And that's something that Metro sponsored and funded and helped see through to adoption. It's getting some local pushback, but again, that's an initiative that Metro's doing. They helped us with our transportation system plan. They also manage the regional flex funds and that selection process. They're, again, pretty big on air quality conformance. What is a regional transportation plan? Well, it's a Metro-wide long-range transportation plan required for all metropolitan regions. It's kind of a long-range blueprint for what...
Is that Metro or state?
It's Metro. Yeah, it's Metro-wide. Long-range blueprint for that guides the region and local planning. It addresses several federal and state requirements. It's a document that needs to be updated pretty regularly, every 4 years. The other piece I wanted to put is out of the RTP comes what we call a financially constrained list. If you remember from the transportation system plan, there's a list of projects we can afford to do and a list of projects that we can't afford to do. So, that's where this list is, in theory, something over the 25-year planning period that we can afford to do through a variety of funding sources. And if I'm talking shell game at all, William, this is where those revenues are generated and how they're generated is kind of a shell game. It's not real clear how those numbers come about, but and a lot of it depends on how well the region's doing. Are we meeting our air quality requirements? If we're not, we might not see as much funding. If we are, we might see more. The other piece I wanted to mention was regional. I think for the RTP, regional means, is it a regionally significant project? So if it's a regional pathway, for instance, versus a neighborhood connective pathway. If it's a regional pathway, it's likely to be on the RTP. If it's a neighborhood pathway that connects a couple neighborhoods, it's probably not going to be on the list. So our TSP has a lot more projects to it than the regional transportation list has. Same thing with driving solutions. So if it's an interchange project, it's more likely to be on there than a neighborhood street project. But some of the projects that we've got on our RTP list, and I know this, I thought about how to share that with you. It's kind of a long list and detailed list. I could share it with you if in probably more of a copy form that we'll send to you in a PDF. But we've combined a lot of our our TSP projects. So, for instance, the Leland Myers Road project that we mentioned, the City Commission authorized a contract on. We've lumped the roundabout, for instance, at Claremont, not Claremont, at
Mount Pleasant.
Mount Pleasant,
Warner
Warner Parrott, that area, Central Point. We lumped that in with a bigger project that also included some pedestrian crossing things that we had in the RTP, and just kind of pulled all those projects and called it one and plugged it into the RTP. We also added a fair amount more contingency in our estimates for those projects because they take time and funding and energy, and usually they don't happen in one big project. They happen in pieces, so there's inefficiencies in just getting those projects out the door sometimes, or getting a grant to fund those projects. We spend a lot of money trying to do that. So anyway, regular RTP updates are required for good reason. We want to be able to reflect recent economic and population trends. So we update these every 4 years. At least that's been the trend for the last. I don't think the RTP has necessarily been around for that long. I think maybe two or three iterations. But they are required to update those every 4 years. They want to bring in if we have an adopted corridor plan, they want to bring that in. Any TSP updates, for instance, that was real helpful this time around. So,
When you say there, you're still again talking about Metro?
Metro.
Okay.
Yeah. The RTP is really driven by Metro. Some schedule. Obviously, we've. Let me go to the next slide. We've gone through a process of confirming the revenue side of the equation, and now we've just gone through the effort of updating the list of projects. And Metro has the lion's share of the work from this point, which is kind of to do some modeling based on those projects, see how it affects air quality. Again, that's the big driver here is air quality. They'll be releasing that information for public comment, so that'll be another way for you to find out about that information, and then they'll make refinements and hopefully adopt that. And they need to adopt it in July of 2014. So that's the RTP. The other one I wanted to talk about is Climate Smart Communities, and this is another program that Metro has put together. It's really, again, more of a guidance document that helps drive future decisions. It's got lots of components to it, whether it be greenhouse gas emissions and reduction of gas emissions, access and mobility, air quality. 2009, the Oregon legislature directed the Portland Metro region to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 20% per capita from cars and small trucks by 2035. So there's lots of reasons, but again, air quality seems to be the driver. We've also got a fair amount of growth planned in the area, so to me it makes sense. That reduced greenhouse gas emissions, this slide kind of represents three scenarios basically, and we've got a state mandate that requires us to hit a 20% reduction, so they're showing that. So the scenario A kind of represents where we're tracking right now based on the improvements that have been happening in the metro region over the last few years. Scenario B kind of represents if we adopt the plans that we have in place. For instance, if the RTP is adopted, then that's what the scenario B represents. Scenario C represents something even greater than that. And so this, in theory, is kind of the target that they're trying to hit. And I think what the work that they have to do is to really kind of take those adopted changes that we're proposing in the RTP and see if they really meet the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So keep in mind, lots of people coming to the region, or at least that's what's projected, and a lot more jobs. So how to balance that means less driving, right?
Or cleaner.
Or cleaner driving, right? Active transportation plan. Again, this is about walking, biking, other modes of transportation besides driving. They also have some guidelines. healthy people and lower health care costs. That's a driver. Building vibrant, active communities. Support and develop tourism opportunities, Blaine, so that's kind of in line with what you're talking about. Increase convenient access, daily needs, provide other choices, lower household transportation costs. That's what the active transportation plan is about. It's really about moving people in other modes. What it won't do, the active transportation won't necessarily require jurisdictions to build pedestrian or bicycle projects above or beyond what the minimum requirements already established in our local plan. So they're not asking us to do more than what's in our adopted transportation plans. They're not adding any requirements to the regional plan at this time. That could change in the future, but right now they're not adding any additional requirements. They're not changing any of the funding policies, so it's not necessarily that this document guides how they're going to award funds in the future. They don't reallocate the funding, so the state still, they're not divvying up how the state or the federal government's going to allocate funding because of this. They're not going to require jurisdictions to add new projects to the RTP. For one, it's not adopted yet, so maybe next time it will. Yeah, I think that's more of the same. It's a lot about improving transit across the region. That's a pretty big part of this plan. Working with TriMet, trying to improve how it serves all regions. So that southeast region, if you can see this map, it's a pretty busy map, but Oregon City's in the southeast corridor, and that's that southeast corridor plan that I talked about earlier. That's something that they're gearing up to get focused on. They're kind of winding down off the southwest and hoping to get that one adopted, and they're moving on to the southeast. They're also going to be doing the east side plan at the same time, so we may be competing for TriMet's interest and Metro's interest on both of those. But
And is the active transportation plan, I know Clackamas County has an active, that's driven by Clackamas County, right?
active transportation is driven by Metro.
Metro.
Clackamas County's watching that. And I mean, all our plans have active transportation worked into them. It's just kind of establishing those guidelines, for future kind of, again, functional plan guidance. So I already talked a little bit about TriMet and the fact that they're going to be coming to Oregon City and that they've got these other committees, but I just kind of want to include that piece in there as well, as active transportation also includes transit. So a few things have happened. We're looking basically in 2013. It's about taking those TSPs that are completed and the old regional transportation plan, anything that we've updated to that, trying to incorporate it in one document of things like pathways, sidewalks, major corridors, and work them into yet another kind of ancillary document and make sure that's consistent with our existing plans, and then move through an approval process next year to get that adopted as well. So, Oregon City and the Regional Transportation Plan, this is kind of where we sit with regard to this. I think, Oregon City's got a lot of accomplishments under its belt, and we've seen kind of negative repercussions of some of that in our recent submittal for a grant, but I think there's a lot of good things that Oregon City has done, including the adoption of the Transportation System Plan. That was, I think that was a good feather in our cap. I think the other piece is, the staff and the city commissioners. We've got a mayor and city commissioner Mum, who's pretty active in C4, which is the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee. That's those are elected officials that have been appointed to that particular body to help drive decisions and make decisions. So they're engaged. I think that's in our favor. We've got an adopted Trails Master Plan. And then our RTP and ATP updates are moving forward in the planning process, and we feel pretty good about those. A lot more numbers. This is really hard to read. but basically, the second row there is the funding target for Clackamas County. So the overall funding over the entire planning horizon for the regional transportation plan is in that first column of numbers. So really $1,370,000,000 worth of funding is expected to come towards Clackamas County over the 25 years of the planning horizon. And then they're showing it allocated across those different planning horizons based on how they project the revenue to kind of come in. So you don't need to necessarily study this. I'm just sharing that big number. Another piece to this is those same that number should coincide with. I don't know if I check that 1.3. Yeah, it gets pretty close to the bottom line number that we're showing in this particular. Well, it's in the first column. It's the bottom number there. That's the Clackamas area target. And so these are all the different cities, Oregon cities, asking for a pretty big amount. That makes sense based on our city size. So the first column is really just what was targeted in the previous RTP. And you see there's the financially constrained, and then the other column next to that, the second column in green, is those projects that are identified but weren't necessarily funded. The last two columns represent what we're asking for in 2014. So we're asking for a few $1 million more, about 20 million, I guess, more in projects to be funded, and but we're pretty close to what was included in the 2010 RTP. A lot of information there, but this one's even further, takes it and breaks it into the different fiscal years, and for the 2014 to 2017, 18 to 24, so it just breaks it out across the entire planning program. Clackamas County is also listed in here. They're kind of down in the colored areas, but that's unincorporated Clackamas County, so they also are at the table for funding as well.
Who did that? Who did that spreadsheet?
The county actually did this spreadsheet. We all contributed to it, but I haven't checked all the math in it. Hopefully it's good. So the current score, grants are still our best bet for funding. They're a fair amount of work effort. The last Connect Oregon grant came through was 36 pages of grant application information that they wanted in the application. And I think they had a document that was just about that long that was explaining how to fill out the document. So there's a fair amount of work that goes into those. I don't know if that's part of the strategy. Probably is, the less requests you get, the better off you are. They almost always require a money match, which can be problematic for us. We're a little better off than others because sometimes we'll be able to match with pavement maintenance utility fees. That's what we were proposing in a lot of the Molalla project. It does make it a little tough to budget for those because, especially with a 2-year budget, if we get the funding, usually it's a couple years out, but it's kind of hard to do that. And then we're seeing more and more, I was talking to Nancy, it never used to be that political. I don't know if you remember, Henry, about this, but it didn't used to have as much politics involved. It was really staff making recommendations, and they just kind of moving through the system anymore. I think it's because the lack of funding and, the high demand, they've gotten quite a bit more political.
When I was going to those committee meetings, it was as political as you described and more so. And Clackamas County was trying to get as much money as they could for the Sunrise Corridor.
Oh, that's still going on. So that chapter or that page hasn't changed.
No.
Local development, they help fund some of these projects as well. So we may see that. Part of the problem that we see with local development and SDC funding is it's kind of the cart before the horse. Until we can spend money in some of our growth areas on infrastructure, the likelihood of development is curtailed. So trying to find ways to fund infrastructure so that development will come and then pay their SDCs to help cover some of those costs is kind of challenging for us. Urban renewal, we've lacked, now it seems, we've used urban renewal in the past to help fund, provide seed money for projects. We see less acceptance of those kinds of proposals for projects. So using urban renewal as a money match, or using urban renewal to help fund the utilities that need to happen underneath these transportation improvements is becoming more kind of problematic. We hear a lot about return on investment through urban renewal, and I just want to say that it's kind of the cart before the horse, especially if you don't have development-ready areas, or if the utilities in those existing areas are so needy. You got to invest in those, and I'm not sure that the development community is necessarily going to do that on their own. So I think that's problematic. I think the regional, the city's regional centers down near the landfill, and I think what we're seeing is that it's my impression, and I want to be careful about this because I haven't heard a lot of people necessarily acknowledging this, but it's my impression that the money that was used for the Jug Handle project was originally allocated for the Sunrise Corridor, and because the city was proposing a development at the landfill, the decision makers made that decision to invest in that project, and we haven't delivered on the development. And so I think that's had an impact on our ability to move funding back into our city for those kind of projects. So it's a factor that we need to think about. The other thing that I think we need to think about is, this is a slide that is out of Washington County. These aren't cities necessarily. These are other groups of stakeholders that have come together to help move these initiatives forward. And I think the Business Alliance is one, good. The chamber does a good job with moving those forward. But I think in Clackamas County, more of these kind of groups that help influence the process is necessary. And I don't know that we have, some of those groups in Clackamas County like we do in Washington County. So that was my spiel on kind of regional transportation planning. I'll just jump into the passenger rail. Do you know how long that took?
It took
45 minutes, no.
It took 40 minutes.
Took 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
Okay, so I need to cut that big time. But
Questions? Are you
sure.
Are you going to wait until the end of this?
No, you can go through that.
Well, it's just a brief one. When you were talking about greenhouse gas emissions, what role does the city play in measuring that?
City doesn't measure that.
I wouldn't think so.
It's Metro who uses, and they measure it through modeling, air quality modeling. So some of that's data driven, I'm sure, but I don't know the details of that. But it's not the city that's measuring air quality.
Okay.
Do you want comments after the meeting is over?
Might be easier. Might make sure your meeting gets over on time. But
I have one question. You mentioned combining projects. Now, let's say a project costs $100,000, another one costs $80,000, but you combine them, so there's got to be some savings. Let's say you save $20,000. What happens to that $20,000? Do we get to keep it assuming you got grant money for those?
Oh, if it's
Yeah,
a
I
grant
should have
money
clarified
project,
that.
yeah. No, not necessarily. We don't necessarily get to keep that funding. It usually goes back in the coffer and it gets reallocated through either another grant, or if another city's project goes over, that's kind of how that plays out. That's not true if it's a city-funded project. We don't lose that money.
That could be reallocated.
That's a project savings that we'll use in a city project. All right, so I'm just going to go through quickly again the Oregon Passenger Rail and some pieces. I don't know how closely you've been tracking this. There've been a couple open houses. There's been online opportunity to see the same information. basically, they're looking at rail alternatives between Eugene and Vancouver, Washington, with the intent that would go all the way to Canada. So high speed, to the degree they can build high speed and facilitate high speed. So the key in just kind of looking at these is there's different colored alignments. There's nothing that says they have to go from Eugene to Vancouver on the red alignment. So they're kind of mixing and mashing some of these alignments as they move through the public involvement process. But they're clipping right along. In fact, they've completed most of their public involvement. Now they're trying to pick alignments, and I say that's plural, they're trying to pick alignments that would move through the environmental assessment process. So the idea was to have various alignments out there, get community feedback, and narrow the search so they wouldn't. I mean, environmental assessments aren't cheap, so they're trying to find an alignment that makes the most sense. And I think they're struggling a little bit with that. There's a fair amount of community outcry about people who feel like they either want it, or if it's going to happen, they want to make sure it happens right. This is a federally funded project, by the way. It's yet, I mean, all they've funded is this preliminary assessment of alignments. There's no construction dollars allocated for this. This is a large-scale project, obviously. So, it's a multi-year project. And again, I think the community involvement effort that they've done to date has been really pretty good. So there's the other piece is there's 3 segments, A, B, and C, and I'm going to focus on segment C. Segment C is the segment that basically is involving Oregon City. There's 2 alignments. There's one that comes from Wilsonville along the 205 corridor, crosses the river at Oregon City, and follows the 205 corridor all the way to 84, and then into Portland along Highway 84. The other alignment follows the Union Pacific track, which basically stays on the south side of the Willamette River and follows Union Pacific tracks. Goes right along through our Amtrak station and through Canby, Milwaukee, Gladstone, into Portland. The interesting piece is that see that little star that shows Oregon City? That's the Amtrak station right there. There's a black star. There's a big star that shows Oregon City, and then there's a little.
Are you using the mouse?
I haven't been, but I can. So right there, that's the Oregon City Amtrak station. And one thing that we noticed the last time is the Amtrak station and a stop in Oregon City is not necessarily guaranteed for the red alignment. It's pretty much guaranteed for the blue alignment, but the red alignment would bypass the station, and the stop would be in Wilsonville instead of in Oregon City. And they're trying to limit the number of stops in the metro area to 3. So that was new information. I didn't necessarily pick that up at the open house. I don't know if any of you did. But
John?
Yes.
When this all came about 15 years ago, Oregon City was a provisional because of Singer Hill. They could not grade separate Singer Hill crossing, and they had to slow to 79 miles an hour per federal rules to get across that crossing if they couldn't grade separate it. And if they had to slow down to 79 miles an hour, they felt they might as well stop. And that's how Oregon City got the station.
Yeah, I have not heard any speeds that they're proposing through the Oregon City area.
They're talking, when I've been going to those meetings, they've been talking about 80 to 90 initially, and hopefully getting up to about 125 at the end of the process.
But that's not in Oregon City.
No, that's just overall.
That's
average.
overall. And I think that's an important distinction.
It is. It is very important.
Because there's obviously places that they're not going to be able to move much faster than what Amtrak moves today.
Milwaukee.
Well, more from Oak Bottom up through into Union Station and then out across the river. That's all a horrible place to drive a train.
Yeah, there's lots of limitations, and they really don't have those limitations figured out. This is very high-level kind of review, and there's people at Union Pacific that are clamoring about the fact that their track is not, if you're looking for safety and speed, it's not going to happen. So, there's lots to play out on this yet. I just wanted you to know that, to me, the only new piece of information from the open house that I picked up on was this idea that Oregon City may not have a stop if the red alignment is chosen as the preferred alignment.
And I was told by an ODOT official that I was concerned that, we're going to invest all this effort into the train depot, activating the train depot, and then to have it realign. He said, well, when's your break even? And I said, I don't know, probably 18 months. Don't worry about it. He says, if a decision was made today, he says it'd be 10 years before the actual, it would take 10 years of planning, and they said it would be another 10 years before they actually get platforms built and everything realigned. So he says,
that's a pretty long-range plan.
Minimum 20 years.
They're going through the plan. The decisions they make today may affect us in 20 years. So,
the other thing too, just real quick, that the Willamette Falls access, that may be another card that plays into this whole thing as well. With 600,000 tourists a year wanting to stop in Oregon City, that'll have an impact.
I'm going to skip this one. So this slide here just essentially depicts, based on the criteria that they established, which is shown in the goals section on the right-hand side of the picture. They've scored these, and the greater the score, the more likely it looks like it's the better alternative. So again, the blue C1 is essentially following the old Union Pacific track, whereas red is the 205 track. So I think the red loses out mostly because of the cost. But the cost seems higher on that I-205 corridor, and there's a lot of question about why that would be. But they talk about the fact that grade separation there's enough crossings. Everywhere there's a crossing, if you're following I-205, if you've got a bridge crossing, what do you have to do with that? So that may be why those cost numbers are so much higher. So it didn't score as well in the cost category.
Another big problem is the radius turn from I-205 corridor to I-84 corridor. That if you're traveling high speeds, that radius is going to have to. I think someone mapped it out, and it was going clear out into through Lloyd Center. So that.
That's going to happen in New York.
It's when you're
Going
banking
too
like
fast.
a roller coaster.
Yeah, cannonball or thunderball.
This is just another way to show some of the costs, and I think they're really just trying to discount that I-205. I think they need to do some more work here. But again, this just really shows, both a lower cost and better score. So the bigger the dot, the better the score. And then, of course, the horizontal scale there is dollars. So it does this graph here really makes the red alignment look like a pretty poor choice. I'm not going to go into explaining this too much. I think Portland's pretty intent on seeing the station in the city of Portland at the Union Station, which to me is a big question mark, or should be. But I get the rail community is pretty powerful in influencing a lot of this stuff. If we're going to get the money to build this, my sense is they're going to have to be on board with where the stops are at. But
On board.
on board.
No pun intended.
Again, most of their public involvement has happened through 2013. They're going to spend about a year, so we're probably not going to have updates for you for about a year on this project. But their intent is to go back and review all that information, get a recommendation from the lead forum that's driving this, and then work through the environmental impact statement. Information that you can get more information. So that's all.
That was 12 minutes on that.
Okay. Got some hacking to do between now and tomorrow night. Was that interesting information, or was that
Sure.
It
not?
was.
Because, you know, we
Yes.
kept hearing it was going to go up to, through Beaverton and cross around, and now it looks like it's not even on the,
Yeah, the tunnel's off the table.
to me, I think they should keep on the same line until they get to the town center and then shoot it straight across the river to Vancouver and around and build a big train station about where Fred Meyer's is by the Gateway Transit Center. So people could park and ride the train. Downtown, you can't park and ride the train. It's-
I think we ought to go right through the middle of Milwaukee.
Well, they are anyway.
But I've heard people mention the station being moved to the airport, and I think that makes a lot of sense with when you have the MAX line that goes all the way to downtown Portland. You could
Everything, all the transportation hub. And
If you want true regional transportation, it makes sense to co-locate.
To go
So-
at-
So Ida
If you
Terrace
want
only
true
had one
regional
place to go?
transportation, it
Yeah.
makes sense to co-locate.
yeah.
Your rail, your air transit.
They found that going on somebody's.
That's what I don't get. I mean, the airport
Eugene
works pretty
today.
well.
Yeah.
It's not in the heart of Portland. I don't quite understand why, especially with, build a connection. I don't think Max goes to the Union Pacific
It
station.
does.
Yeah, it does right by it.
Okay.
That's why you can't
so
get
that's
it there.
So it's there. It's not high speed, but it's there. So if there's a stop at the airport, it seems like, I don't know, it just seems to work for me. But I don't think Portland agrees with me. Not-
By the way, just a note, to concur with what you were saying, you wanted to be careful. I happened to be in a conversation with one of the Metro councilors, and it was, the statement was made, it kind of surprised me, but this, because of what happened with the jug handle, that it wasn't, I don't know if it was contractual, but it was certainly an implied promise that, we would follow through with this development, and they allocated the money to us, that the state, and she didn't name names, but she said there are people at the state level that are really upset with Oregon City and will not allocate additional funds. They'll be. So I was kind of surprised by that comment. So hopefully we can, be a little bit more cooperative in bringing these developments to fruition.
Okay, any more comments? Okay, we move on to 6E, City Commission Goals, information. Who's got it? Kathy?
That's what it is, information. You asked for a copy.
Now you got it.
Read it, learn it, love it.
This system is a little difficult. I have to put a title in order, on the agenda in order to transmit stuff to you anyway.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe explain that for Henry and William, because it seemed like early in 2013 or maybe 2012, this group suggested that we add to each item, we add whether it's a presentation or an update or discussion or information. Were those the categories?
Or action, or if we need a motion.
Right.
So if it says information,
It's just there. We
It's
don't
information.
necessarily
you
have
can
to-
just say information, yeah.
okay.
Well, for a while, we also had a number of items that were listed, and you wouldn't talk about them unless someone asked that it be brought up and talked about. I mean, you'd have like 4 or 5 things on an agenda, they'd be attached
Mhm.
for the members to read, but
Right.
you wouldn't talk about them at the meeting unless somebody asked. Kind of like a consent agenda for city council.
Yeah.
We haven't been doing that lately. Maybe the things haven't lent themselves to that. I don't know.
Well, I always thought that that's what the information was. If it said just information, we didn't necessarily have to have a conversation about it.
Right. And with regard to this last one, I think we were talking about this organization, this committee, doing some goal setting for itself. And so that's why I suggest we get the cities so we could coordinate with what they've listed there.
I get it.
So I don't know, do we have a work product that we need to come up with, our own goals that fit within, nest in the city goals
I
here?
can answer that question.
Go ahead,
Um,
Bob.
Last year, we went through those city goals and came up with how we could enhance and augment those. And since it was a 2-year budget, their goals haven't changed much, I don't think at all. But some of the goals have been accomplished. So what we can do to enhance and augment the existing ones, some of that may have changed. And we had in the past, we would review in February the city commission goals, because then they would have established those by that time. But I think, and then in March, our chair presents the goals and accomplishments of the TAC to the city commission. So I think if we stay on that same timeline, or if we if we all take these home and study them and get our ideas, and then in the February, if we put it on the February agenda to make any changes that we wish to make from our previous goals and enhancements, then we can request to be presented on the city commission agenda for their March meeting. For Steve to
And the
give
city
them
commission is going to be doing a retreat, and even though it's a 2-year budget, they're going to take a new look at the goals. And I don't necessarily know that they're proposing to add a bunch, but it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. But so that I agree with you, Bob. That's probably a good process. We can, that doesn't mean we don't have. We can put an item on the January agenda if that's what you
begin
want to do.
discussions and, yeah.
Sure.
Might depend on when that new goal, it might depend on when the city's goal review is going to be. I know they're not going to have a full-blown retreat this year like they did last year, but
I think it's January. I know
I'm
it's
pretty sure it
January,
is.
but I can't remember the date. I've got it on my calendar here. Let me see if I can find it.
While you're looking at it, I mean, just looking at the goals 1 through 5 here, there isn't one that's entitled transportation. I mean, you almost have to extrapolate maybe mostly from goal 1, economic development, from projects there that might be transportation related.
Well, I'll give you an example of last year, Goal 1 on the Cove project. We decided to assign a TAC member to keep abreast of the transportation as the Cove is planned, and then ask appropriate questions, and then the TAC to make recommendations. That's what we came up with last year on that line item. That's an example of how the TAC can support their goals.
The retreat's on January 25th.
Yep.
But you're right, it's smaller, scaled back.
I guess the point is, though, that is going to be after the TAC meeting. Just missed it.
No?
Yeah?
After, yeah.
Yeah, well, then that's why our timeline was to discuss our support of it was in February.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Rather than having it on January's agenda.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Anything else with it?
Well, there was 3 items that.
Those 3 other items, Bob had one, and who else? What's
I
it?
had one.
Betty.
Go ahead, ladies first.
Oh, well, mine is going back to the intersection. I live off Central Point, between Central Point. I mean, if you can put it up on the map. I mean, I've lived in this area now 20 years, and because of all the development that has occurred down Central Point Road, plus they also have it as incident route off 99E if there's accidents on 99E. And it's like when you're on Central Point trying to get on Warner Parrott, the lineup is terrific because of the signal and that whole intersection. You know.
I think they should put a policeman there to traffic.
Well, and the thing is, I know last week meeting I told John they need a stop sign. I hate, stop signs are not my thing. But, if they could put a stop sign on Warner Parrott so people could at least alternate getting out. However, then the problem is there's a left-hand turn lane on to Lynn
Right.
at the signal.
It's a short intersection.
It's a short intersection, and it's like, I also was talking to John earlier tonight, it's like people are coming up Warner Parrott, going east, and all of a sudden they turn right and skip into the Quickie Mart there. They're now crossing the left-hand lane, the travel lane, into the parking lot. Then you have people that are going west on Warner Parrott, turning left onto Central Point, and then all of a sudden, oh, I need to go to Quickie Mart, and so then they turn left into Quickie Mart. And I was thinking, those white sticks that they put, along, if that's feasible. But
Tubular barricade.
yeah, but apparently, they do have a right to cross the double yellow line, cross the left turn signal lane, and another lane to get into a business.
I mean,
Good candidate for a roundabout, right?
Sure,
Yeah.
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 What is that?
How much land would the roundabout?
imagine a roundabout right here.
2 miles wide.
It's like the pentagram of doom. It's a 5.
I mean, yeah, it's a failed intersection, but, and I don't know what the solution is.
If we
Can I make a
only
quick
owned
comment about
more
that?
of that land there, John.
Go ahead.
It's interesting to note that intersection, not only
You're
the
stirring the pot.
Central Point.
pentagram of doom, but it's,
owns-
it's also the
Central-
it's also the intersection of 4 neighborhood associations. So you've got both Rivercrest and
South
Hillendale
End,
and
Tower
South
Vista.
End and Tower
Tower Vista,
Vista,
right.
all co-join at that intersection.
Are you guys familiar with the 5 corners in New York City? It's where 5
Heard
of the
of it.
boroughs meet. Historically, is where they would gather and battle it out for neighborhood domination. That very much looks like the 5 corners.
Well, I'm wondering, because Mount Pleasanton is no longer an active school, is there any, of purchasing property on, I don't know if that would even solve the problem.
Betty,
Yes.
one thing that would probably enter into this discussion would be that was my first project with the city, was that intersection.
So
And-
you're the one.
Who voted him on this committee?
Warner Parrott, thank you. Warner Parrott used to connect up to Lynn Avenue by going
Straight ahead.
between Mount Pleasant School and the, and then this little S curve didn't exist. Central Point came around and curved to the off toward Lynn Avenue, so you had this offset intersection of Williams and Warner Parrott.
Well, that was solved.
And came down here and had the Central Point, Leland, Warner Milne intersection. And so they came through here. At the time we did that, those of us involved in it thought that perhaps that S-curve should have been back further to the west about a half a mile. But that was way too late to, deal with that particular part of it. This white little building here, just above the intersection, that's the school district IED office, and so
Devices.
that's separate from the school itself. You have the other side of this is you have the middle school still over here on the
Like
east.
Gardner is
Gardner,
on
yeah.
Lynn, where the field is to the right.
And the only access into that whole neighborhood is off of Lynn Avenue.
Yeah.
Correct. Right.
Well, Betty, would the transportation problems be solved significantly if people couldn't turn into that convenience store area?
Well, I think that, that would be one solution, because you have people that are going from west to east that take a right-hand turn and zip across the 2 lanes. Then you have people coming out of the market, turning onto Central Point left. Then you have people coming through the signal, going on to Central Point, and then all of a sudden, I need to go to the market, so then they turn left again. And so it's like
It's totally
the traffic just stops.
Yeah. So it might be, the least expensive solution is just buy out the convenience store.
Absolutely. Eminent
And
domain.
you don't have it,
Right.
and it's done.
Put in the roundabout.
I mean, that's part of the problem. Part of the other problem, John, is the traffic on Warner Parrott. Because-
I'm sure it's not enough of it.
Yeah, not enough, right. Trying to get out from Central Point, because Central Point has a stop sign, and then you have the signal that goes on to Warner Milne. You have a left-hand turn that turns on to Lynn.
Right, that's why a roundabout, it looks like a roundabout.
So you're basically saying there's a lack of opportunity to get onto Warner Parrott from Central Point,
Right, or
to make that left turn from Warner Milne onto Central Point.
Leave the market,
Correct.
Just take out their parking lot.
And I think a lot of this,
I go down
because of
Leland
all the
Road,
development
down
that
to
has
Claremont,
occurred
across.
down
Take
Central
that
Point.
road. I've been in that building too.
Go down Leland Road down to
It's a
Central Point.
private-
Right.
And-
I mean, yes, and people
Take
do
those
start
two
cutting
out.
through the
Right.
new
Yeah,
subdivisions.
Well, I go down
Take a
to,
little
I go
nick
down
out of the
to
church.
Claremont.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then-
And do it, yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking. We've got more connectivity. As these parcels deliver, we'll continue to see more and more connectivity. It's not direct connectivity, and it may not necessarily get you northbound if that's kind of what you're hoping.
This
to
was
do.
signaled.
One thing that you would notice is that there's no
The
way to
roundabout
get
is here.
from Leland to Molalla in this area except Warner Parrott or Claremont.
That's true. And there's not any. There's nothing in our TSP that shows better connectivity between Warner Milne Road and Claremont.
And the only one that makes any sense is to bring Beaver Creek across or take, what is it, something, whichever that, Highfield Court, run it across the county property and connect it up to Beaver Creek.
Not likely.
Not likely, no. But from a
I
pure,
mean, the roundabout is the solution. It's just, not going to happen tomorrow.
Question on that roundabout, would that be situated like in the intersection at Warner Parrott and Lynn? Warner Milne?
It makes sense. That's part of our corridor plan, to figure out how to fit that roundabout. That we've actually seen from our transportation engineer, a large roundabout, which kind of encompasses all 5 legs of that, and a smaller roundabout that encompasses 4 legs of it, but still creates kind of doesn't take in the Central Point leg, in other words.
Because Central Point, if it was a smaller one at the intersection there, the current main intersection, then Central Point would feed out to the right, and then if they're going to go down Warner Parrott to the left, they'd have to feed around that roundabout.
Yeah, take a 270.
What's that?
Yeah,
Take a 270
Right.
right.
that's okay.
They might. Whether Central Point traffic could turn left onto Warner Parrott Road, or whether they'd have to turn right and go through the roundabout
Yep.
and come back, is
I
yet to
think
be
they would.
determined. And I think I think we'll learn a fair amount about that, Betty, in that corridor study, because we've included in that scope of work better establishment of what a roundabout would really look like there.
When is that supposed to be done or scheduled to be done?
It's
15?
pretty quick. I mean, we've got a contract with them, and it's pretty quick. I think there's
I think-
about a 6-month
I
process.
thought it was through April or March.
It's
March
it's
31?
early spring, mid spring is when the project's scheduled.
And I've been arming them, we've been arming them with all the information we have. Like we had, in 2009, we had a study done. And at that time, they said a roundabout's not worth pursuing at this time. And this is, I found it online. We've uploaded all these special transportation studies. And then we've also had some schematics drawn for the roundabout. And so we've given those to the consultant doing the corridor John's talking about, which is the Leland Lynn Myers Leland Lynn corridor study.
I think the solution is go to Beaverton and drive around Beaverton for
Yes.
a couple of peak hour commutes.
No.
Well, yeah,
And
everything's relative.
and then come back and go,
That's true.
was I really held up that long? Probably not.
Exactly.
But I
217.
know Oregon City's not used to congestion, but I can tell you that Oregon City's a dream.
Oh, yeah.
From
Other
217
communities.
to Demerel Ford, it takes you
Yeah.
20 to 30 minutes sometimes.
But I don't want to I don't want to categorically say that there's no solutions here. I think we need, I think Martin, there might be a striping and there might be something. I don't think, I think putting in a hard barrier there to a business is kind of the same problem we're dealing with the Dutch Brothers. And, we need to be careful about property owners and,
It
their
compromises the viability of their businesses.
Especially
At the
when we
signal-
permitted a previous curb cut that allows the passage through, any change to that, it's an economic impact to the resident or to the property owner, and to some extent it's construed as a taking, which is unconstitutional. So.
The
Right.
driveway comes back out to Central Point. At the signal, they can also turn left and get into the parking lot of the Plaid Pantry and all those businesses.
Well,
the signal
not
where-
if they're heading out of town. If they're heading into town, they could pass that driveway, come around, and do that. But yeah, I just think, Betty, it's preventing access to either one of those driveways is going to be a problem
legal.
for the city, and I don't think. I guess we need to look and see how big of a problem that really is. I don't.
Unless you can demonstrate that by making it. I'm sure there are some people that don't go to that store because it's difficult to get in and out of. And if by putting a roundabout in, that makes it easier access to the store, giving up a little bit of land might be in there.
Oh, well, if we're talking about roundabout solutions, I think that's a whole different conversation. I'm just
Yeah.
talking about a short-term
Yeah, short-term
solution
solution.
that would prohibit a left turn from, somebody coming up.
Because you're also
Steve.
dealing with a lot of, pedestrians and kids walking, from Gardner Middle School.
That's the
You know,
point
depending
that
the
I'd like
time
to
of the
make,
day,
is that it might not
is.
just be a delay and an inconvenience, it might be a safety issue. And once you've got safety on your side, you can do a lot.
Yeah, I have not heard about a safety issue there. It's well lit.
We just need somebody to get hit out there.
Volunteers?
Well, that's how they got the red light down there on.
Betty, you have not seen the problem. When it used to be the drive-in down there down the street,
Oh, on
us
South End?
kids in the late 60s, early 70s used to take Warner Parrott Road and do 60 and 70 miles an hour up to that intersection.
Oh, my, okay.
At 2 o'clock in
I've
the
only
morning.
lived here 20 years, so.
At 2
The
o'clock in the
other
morning.
thing is I'm sure we'll see you at the corridor study open houses, and we'll get your
Yes, you will.
emails about
Yeah.
So-
I'm just.
Well, and also the TriMet, because, I am a TriMet rider, I, go down to Clackamas Town Center and ride, max into the city.
Yeah.
And I think, like,
Now you've done
changing
it.
subject, but if they could get a bus, a shuttle bus
It's not
to
center.
max,
Yeah. Do you ride regularly?
Oh,
Are you a regular rider of TriMet?
I was, yeah.
You were?
I was.
Because, the other thing that, it's hard to pay staff to ride transit, the staff hours, but if we had a volunteer that would willingly get out on that bus and just kind of seek out, concerns, that would be beneficial when TriMet came, to get the details of what kind of service needs we have. And what, so I don't know if you're interested in spending a day on TriMet just for trying to figure out Oregon City, but I
I
think.
did it all the time with my students,
All right.
Oh, yeah, knew
Well,
that
we might tap
was
into you
fast.
for that if you don't mind.
No, and that would be fine. But yeah, hopefully, this, I don't know what the solution is to the intersection.
Mr. Chair, what's the next item?
Go ahead. Well, we
I'm
had,
asking.
Bob had it.
Could you get the map up to Oak Tree Terrace and yeah, up on Holcomb Boulevard?
He's getting there.
Yeah. Okay. There's a little street there on Oak Tree Terrace, right there, yeah, that is supposed to be being developed for multifamily housing. And right now, it's more of a drug use street than anything else. And I found that I can't see that from my house. My house is quite close to there. But I'm kind of wearing the hat of the Park Place Neighborhood Association chair right now. When I was going door to door knocking on people to try to get them to come to our general meeting, several people right there brought that to my attention. How difficult is it to get barriers in a street like that is not being used? It's not a through street at all. There's no homes on it. I understand the fire department used it for rappelling practice some time back because it's quite steep bank there. Get some concrete barriers. I don't know if that kind of thing is possible, but
We'd probably be a little better off to just do more of a gate
Yeah.
than barriers, because that way, if we do need in there, we can unlock the gate.
Can you blow that up a little
And
bit,
to
please?
some extent, it may be counterproductive to your end goal if we have some sort of barricade back there. While it may keep people from taking vehicles back there, vagrants and others will see as this is a protected area. No one can come back here. Squad car is not going to get back here readily. So there's pluses and minuses with doing some form of exclusion there.
Is that enough, John?
Yeah, thank you.
Cameras?
I can go take a look at it tomorrow, and then we'll take a look at.
I remember
Spitball some
when,
things.
I mean, this whole development is one of those developments that really didn't, the city didn't bode well. I mean, the developer went bankrupt. The final lift of paving out here in Oak Tree Terrace, we had to pay to do. It was kind of a mess, and it still is. It's
Well,
I mean, to try to develop that the way it was originally planned is going to be a challenge.
well, my house is right there up on the upper right-hand corner.
Right here, right here.
Right, no, up,
Right
right in,
there.
that's it, right there.
We'll zoom in on that.
No, you'll see my factory back there. You'll see my factory back there in the forest.
Softly green back here.
Yeah, right. But anyway, that street right there in front of my house is about 10 feet narrower than it was originally planned to be, too. And the developer somehow got that done, and that Oak Tree Terrace is the only way in and out of that whole development down there. It was just a big mess. In fact, Nancy Krashower told me that that never should have happened. You know, that one ingress and egress street out of that whole development. Anyway, that's, the neighbors would, I understand where you're coming from, Martin, but I think that if you guys could look at that. And there's also an issue on
It'd be
4th of
helpful.
July down there where the kids go down there. Of course, walking down there wouldn't prevent this, but
I think it would be helpful to schedule. Do you get much turnout, or from that group? Because it would be helpful to have a neighborhood kind of meeting. We've got a request for a pathway closure coming in, and we're thinking about sitting down with the neighborhood, scheduling something. I don't know, or some way to get their input on that.
I could knock on some more.
I don't
doors.
mind. I think closing it makes sense. I know sometimes the neighborhood uses that for parking because there is no on-street parking. So if there's a party or some kind of an event, they direct people to park down there. But other than that,
I've never seen that happen at all down
We get the police.
I just went to a party there. I parked on that street just less than a week ago. I'll tell you that right now, Bob.
He was part of the vagrant situation.
Yeah, you know that loud, obnoxious traffic you were talking about?
That was you guys?
No. So anyway, I see the point. I know it well. I think the right solution would be some kind of a gate as opposed to a concrete barrier.
there. Yeah, right. That'd be.
Yeah.
Driveway to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll look
I'll
further at
investigate.
that. if you could get us, can you get us a neighborhood letter, you think? You think you could get a neighborhood kind of vouch to say, yeah, that's
The
what
neighborhood
that's what
association
the
letter,
neighborhood
or
association
a letter
would like.
from the neighbors.
From the neighborhood association.
Yeah, I'll do that, I'll do that.
I think there was one more, wasn't there?
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. One is that, you know, my involvement in civic stuff has only been a couple years old, so it's like an awakening each year or month that goes on. It seems like there's another layer of understanding that, you know, you gain. And so recently I've been really impressed with the value of this committee. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but there's an orderly way of making decisions in a city, and these committees are part of that. Recently, we had some individuals are very good about, they're very passionate, and they, you know, stir up the crowd and get people rallying in one direction or another on issues that tends to be pretty chaotic, in my opinion. But a couple of months ago, we had an individual who was very concerned about the traffic incidents, the number of incidents at 99E, and particularly connected to the Cove. You know, when the Cove comes in, this is all going to be just this terrible mess, and it was all dramatic, and we need to stop the funding and stop the development, and you know, and so my encouragement to that person was, we really need to have an orderly way, and can we funnel, this is a transportation issue. We don't need to try and bring it before the Citizen Involvement Council. We don't need to bring, that's why we're here. We deal with traffic problems. And so bring that concern initially to our committee, let us vet it, discuss it, and then we give a recommendation to, you know, and if members of the CIC want to come, you know, come together to you know, be here and have us listen to their concerns. That's an orderly process rather than leapfrogging over the transportation committee and going directly to the planning committee or directly to the city commission. And I think we have important work to do here in terms of helping to really get down into the minutiae to understand those details. So that's background. Another issue is the South End concept plan. And it's, again, another level of understanding. There's an individual who's very concerned about the Title 11, which, you know, these concept plans, I guess Metro has some involvement, I guess Title 11, I'm not fully understanding it, but Title 11 dictates density levels, dictates, or I don't know if it's dictates or it's a guideline, but they want...
it's specific in terms of, the density requirements for a particular area.
Yeah, which means so many houses, more houses per acre or per lot or whatever it may be, and then vertical they want, and of course this whole idea that you were speaking of that goes back to you know, smaller carbon footprint and getting people to drive less. So the concept is, you know, in these neighborhoods like South End, if you're going to bring more density there, then you add, you know, a shopping area, coffee shops, things like that, so people don't have to travel so far to get to those amenities. Well, you know, that's good, and we all support that. What this individual is bringing up, which is definitely a transportation issue, is if you go to I think it's the International Transportation...
ITE, International Transportation Manual, but where's the E?
Engineers.
Engineers. Yeah. And I don't know if that really has, if that manual has jurisdiction, but this person's point is that based on the density levels that Metro is asking Oregon City to put in the South End concept plan, that based on those densities, this ITE evidently has formulas or calculations. I've never seen it, but I want to learn. But and they're saying that it's way you know, in excess of what would be.
ITE lists trips per land use type. So if it's a single family residence, it may say the average number of trips are 10 per day, or if it's a restaurant or school or
whatever.
they've got all those listed out, and based on national numbers, they tell you, you know, if it's a hospital, for instance, you know, it might be how many beds or how many square feet. and that will tell you how many trips they theoretically believe come out of that. And in the South Benton plan, that's based on particular layout, based on all the community input, and then they apply these overlays of land uses. And I think what we're hearing from some is that those densities are too high, and because with those densities, then comes a bunch of trips, and there's not, there's questions about where all those trips go. How do they get to the bottom of the hill? Where are they going? And there's a lot of, I believe, professional judgment that goes into some of those conclusions about where those trips will go. What people will do if people get tired of congestion at Claremont or at Central Point and Warner Parrott and Leland, they may choose to not go there at that time, or they may choose to find a different route. It's weird how people react to congestion, and it's hard. It is. I mean, I would say many of the agencies, especially in Clackamas County, but that's probably true in other agencies as well, are struggling with the fact, or other counties in the metro area, but they're struggling with the requirements that Metro has placed on density, especially on the fringe. I mean, you can't get any more south in the metro area than South End Road. And to propose high densities that you might propose in an area that's better served by transit, for instance, or better served by a network of routes,
Additional roads. Mm-hmm.
I find myself, agreeing with some of that. It seems like if the densities are inappropriate for the land, for the transportation network, then that's kind of a problem. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Right.
But it'd be good to have that discussion here rather than, across a lengthy email chain of people that aren't really that tuned into it.
Well, and the evidence of that is that, if the right person or wrong person, whichever you want to put it, but certain personalities have an ability to really energize, and once you start pulling in personalities from around Clackamas County to weigh in on an Oregon City issue, that's a red flag for me. And I'm saying, why does this have to become politicized, if you will? Why does it have to become an issue? We're all concerned about these things as well. And so, channel your thoughts and your questions and concerns through our committee so that we can then study these issues and come up with a recommendation. And it may be that we recommend lower density. I don't know but I think our committee has an impact and has a potential impact in issues like these. And I just, encourage us to weigh in on
I think
those.
part of it's a chicken and egg issue. What's going to determine density, road capacity or future road capacity, or density and required density. Maybe it's required much more than the preferred density. And I don't know that a city has the capability of moving the density around within its own urban growth boundary to get it to the one point where it matches best with the current highway capacity for that density. Because it's privately owned land, and the private owner decides when he wants to develop. So you don't control the sequencing, and that's a dilemma.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not an expert on this. Tony may have a lot of information. It may make sense to have a guest speaker that, kind of focuses on, from Metro, that focuses on how those densities are established, what the potential for is change, is there any, mitigation measures. But, I think I do see differences on those areas that are in the fringe that just aren't served well with transportation systems. To load them up, I think, Glen Oak Road is an example of that. I kind of struggle with what happened out on Glen Oak Road there with, although it's full, there's people out there, they're paying for that rent. But, it's still not well served by transit. So
It overloaded Glen Echo Road. At quitting time or going to work.
right, yeah,
all
we're
those
getting
people
complaints right now about, same complaints we had on, what was that little
Tharp Court.
Tharp Court. those same kind of complaints.
The next one down, which Bob LaSalle mentioned,
You just kind of, know that we haven't quite got it figured out on the fringe. If we don't have, pretty much the south end of town is disconnected from Metro. I would say everything on the north end's got decent connectivity.
It
Well,
seems to, thank you. It seems to me as though Mr. Blaine, Mr. Meyer, is bringing up a couple of different points that have converged, and I think if you parse them out, one is the process that we go through to address any issue, whether it's South End or not. So the process is one piece of that. South End is another. The South End Concept Plan, and has this committee had the opportunity to weigh in on that issue. The other is the whole general issue of density versus transportation, and where it can come into conflict. So I would propose we put this on as an agenda item rather than talking about it tonight.
That's what the next items are.
Well,
Your
there you
number
go.
7.
Yeah, actually, that was my point, that we would put this
There's a
on-
point to this. Great.
Yeah, yeah. There's always a point. I always make points. That we would put this on the agenda, and be aware that this is an issue that we should appropriately weigh in on.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And we have had representation for the South End Road project, and Bob, I think you should have for the Planning Commission and testified in favor of that plan. So but.
Well, and that's true. We've seen presentations in general, but not specific to this issue of density and traffic, flow and so forth. So, yeah.
And you're talking about the overall puzzle to be solved to match these and make them work, and how much flexibility, what tools do we have as a
Correct.
city to do that?
Right.
Or are we just in a little tight little box and we have to take what's given?
But South End is going to affect this Central Point Road and Warner Parent,
Oh, the whole city.
that whole corner there, because they got to
Absolutely.
come somewhere.
Absolutely.
But we're the committee that can find solutions and make
So what's the
recommendations.
agenda item for next
How you wanna-
meeting?
how you wanna
Do we
run it?
have? Do we,
I would suggest that this committee reviews the balance of density versus transportation modes in the South End area, specifically defined in the South End Concept Plan.
Okay.
Just so that we're more familiar, but maybe by that time we can get some better understanding of the ITE, whatever it is, of that manual, what those guidelines are, and how that pertains to our current situation.
And perhaps we could have, evidently this is a CIC issue. I'm not convinced it's the CIC in general as much as it is one of the committee members, board members of the CIC. But, I've encouraged this person to bring their specific concerns, with Alice Watts, with the chair, so that it's truly a representation of the CIC, and have them give a presentation. So I don't know if you're willing to do that or open to
do
it.
you want them to present, or do you want us to put together kind of a group that speaks more informed, with informed kind of, so for instance, there's Pete Walter, who's managing the project. If we're talking density and what the city can do about density, and maybe pressing back with some of the Metro numbers, then maybe there's a Metro person with Tony Conkle that could be available. We've got traffic engineers that are representing the South End Concept Plan that both, I think we've now got a secondary engineer as well who's looking at the work that the other. So there's a few people that are pretty well informed about that. If we want to focus on South End, or do we want to kind of focus on density and traffic impacts?
And would it be preferable to do a work session on that?
Well, yeah.
I don't have
I think we need to have the background information so we know what flexibility we do or don't have. We could look at the South End, and if they're already in a box and they have no flexibility, we'll hear the same story and come up with the same
How
solution.
about if it's more general to citywide, but use the South End
Yes, it's-
plan as an
There you
example.
go.
Right, that, yeah, exactly,
Nice.
All right,
exactly.
so let's
good.
work through
Yeah, 'cause I
that.
think it's a little late to get in on that
I-
south end, because it's already gone
Yeah.
before the planning commission
But I
once.
think just, using it as an example
Yeah.
of areas where.
Yeah, that'd be
It
good.
generates these kinds of questions, how much flexibility do we have in
Because
responding to them?
That is true. The South End plan is well into,
Pretty much put to bed.
well into the planning commission's
That
approval
horse
process.
has left the barn.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks. But-
Well, and just, just so you know that there are certain individuals who are wanting to push the horse back into the barn and have a citywide conversation about this, and so, so just to let you know that, and if we
So
can be, if
I'll,
we,
I'll chat with Tony, and he's well aware of where the South End plan is, but he may also be able to have some recommendations on who would be good from Metro. I think having somebody from Metro to talk about those densities is not a bad thing, because the more they hear about densities and why they are problematic for agencies, especially on the fringe, is probably good message for them to hear.
understanding the ITE, Title 11, all of that, how that all works together, I think from a transportation standpoint would be really,
Okay.
instructional for us.
Any other future agenda items? Want to go to number 8? Want to adjourn?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.